One. So I'm gonna sit right here, Charlie,
Show.
and you just look at me like.
Yeah, I've been interviewed a lot of times. Well, we take them for granted sometimes, but this one is a term. Chicano is like it was considered a bad word back in the past. I believe that it comes from the word Mexica, Mexicanos. The Mexica were what the Aztecs actually called themselves, and it was phonetically was changed to Mexica, Mexicanos, and I think it's a form of truncated form of Mexicanos, Chicanos, but it meant somebody who's lower class, right? Or even cholos is a word that goes into that's mixed or Indian. It's kind of like related. So yeah, that's where the word, from where the word comes. But at the same time, uh, people say, well, what if you want to define it? It's hard to define because we do not have a nation state. The caste system, where there were different categories of people. At the top, there were different ways of categorizing people. The first, in the hierarchy, were the Peninsular Spanish, and then we have the Criollos, who were the Spanish born in the on this continent, in the American continent. Uh, and then you have mestizos, which were combination of Indian and Spanish. And then you have mulattoes, who were the combination of blacks and whites. And then you had zambos, which were the combination of black and Indian. And then, I mean, I think some countries even had like 23 categories, like coyote atrás con sambo, like they were 1/4 black African, 1/4 Spanish, and 1/4 Indian, and 1/4 Spanish. They even went down like that. Okay, so that's why we still have that, since we have a mix of different, shall we say, ethnic groups or biological populations. Race is, to me, it's a political term and a social term. Race is not biological. There's only one, as far as I know, at least in modern times here, only one species. The rest, it's social and political, because it's, I would say, ethnic groups. You can, and so that's why that we have this idea of, we're indigenous, but we're also European. We also have African blood. For example, I've had my sister did our DNA, and I think we're like 60% Native North American Indian, 25%, 30% European, and 10% black, something like that sort. Because they brought in a lot of Africans to Mexico as well. I do identify as a native indigenous person, but one that, I didn't have not followed that traditional old native ways, and I don't think that I believe there's a lot of things that we can learn from there, from a lot of those ancestors, a lot of knowledge, a lot of culture, but at the same time, I do not want to regress to try to live like that, because I was not raised with that culture. We are not. But at the same time, appreciating it. I really, I've gone to Latin America. I've gone and lived down in Bolivia, down in the, well, not live, but, spend summers being up in Bolivia with native people and stuff like that, which I am one too. But at the same time, I've been influenced by the Spanish. I've been influenced by the Americans. So I believe that when you're colonized, that you want to go back and and you realize that you've been kind of like duped, of who you are. Like some of my friends will say, "Oh, I'm an American," Chicano friends, right? I says, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sorry. You know what? Yes, you are. You do look a little bit like George Washington. Come to think about it, those are not our ancestors, okay? In that sense, or any sense, really. So yeah, yeah. And as I said earlier, it's very emotional, and it can be very painful, and that's where people start getting upset. They start, just arguments and conflicts, whereas we need to be really honest and really take a good examination of where we stand now and where we're going. But romanticizing the past doesn't get it either. I don't like romanticizing the past. Well, it just depends. There was some. If you read a book called Primitive Rebels, I forget the name of the author, but he goes in that book. He takes a Marxist analysis of people who work outside the laws, and they can go from left to right politically. They can be, I guess, in certain ways. I guess the mafiosos in Italy were kind of like uh, outside the law when they began, for protection, right? But they seem to turn kind of like right wing, but they can also be left wing. It just depends. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're progressive, but they're fighting against the society for whatever cause, like maybe Jesse James, right? He was a Confederate soldier who rebelled against I believe he was a Confederate veteran who turned against the system. So it's usually the outside. They turn into bandits here, or like Robin Hood, right? They're outside the law, but they're fighting for a cause. They're fighting for a reason. Tiburcio Vasquez, for example, the reason I chose Tiburcio Vasquez, at least at this point, over Joaquin Murrieta is because Joaquin Murrieta is more of a legend. Even though he did exist, I did publish one book on Joaquin by Humberto Garza, and he did a lot of research on Joaquin, and he was a mythical character and a legend at the same time. And you really didn't, with the society as a whole, didn't know who he was. For example, there was, there was 5 Joaquins. Okay, 5 bandits named Joaquin, and they all seem to be like meshed into one. Like one Joaquin would rob Los Baños, for example, and another Joaquin would rob here in Los Angeles, in the same day. The newspapers and the media also are very important in portraying the Mexicans and the Chicanos as bandits and outlaws, and so we have that to this day too with the media, especially like with Tiburcio Vasquez, uh, and he there is actually a lot of information on him compared to Joaquin, right? And he was in prison twice. Is 1856. He was in San Quentin, one of the original gangsters, I guess you could say. And then he was back in prison in 1861. And some of the same problems that we have now with people who have been in prison, he said that the first time he came out of prisons, the law enforcement officials would chase him. He would be working, and they'd go find him and give him a hard time and harass him. And that's what happens to a lot of people who come out of prison too.
Who is this?
Tiburcio Vasquez. So yeah, there's actual court documents. They have records of him, whereas Joaquin they don't. Supposedly he was killed by the California Rangers right off Highway 5.
Oh, and they had his head in there.
Yeah, but I don't think it was Joaquin. It was probably Three Finger Jack and some other guys. But since it was a Mexican head, they cut it off, and they would go around showing it in the county fairs and exhibit, and they would charge to see his head. But I don't think it was Joaquin. Joaquin was from Sonora. They have all these pictures of him People wrote books about him, but it's a fictional character. The Joaquin Murrieta was actually from Sonora. He was Mexican. He came up here in 1851, I believe, 1850, and he got in. There's legends of what happened to him. It was a tale of revenge because they killed his brother, and they raped his wife, and that's how the story goes. But the Tiburcio was actually, there's documentation of him. When they caught him here in Los Angeles in 1873, they caught him over there by where the Paramount Studios are now, or is, where the Paramount Studio is, and or Paramount Studios are, which anyway. So they caught him. They shot him. They wounded him about 3 or 4 times. Mostly they shot him, but they also got a lot of shotgun pellets. He was also hit with shotgun pellets, and he was transported by steamship down to Salinas, because it was in Monterey County that they got him for a robbery down in Tres Pinos, which is one of the towns over there, and but they had to move the trial to San Jose. They held him in San Jose, and they convicted him not for the murder of that occurred at Tres Pinos, or the murders that occurred when they robbed that Snyder's store, but that he was an accomplice. From what I understand, he was the first person in California to be tried in that manner, is that he not actually was charged with killing anybody, but that he was part of that gang.